Show me your guinea pigs. I find your life fascinating. It's like enough already. I need to go. Like the bartender needs to cut me off.
Here we are, and welcome to the Friday Night Movie Podcast, where you've got three siblings in three time zones. I took that from Lily's intro last week when she hosted. I like it. It's also because that's what our dad used to think the name of the podcast was for the first year that we did this.
He's like, I love three siblings, three time zones. Like that's the longest name ever. It's a terrible name.
And he's such a big fan, and he'd tell people that was the name of it. So then they'd go and look for it, and it would be very confusing. And so we're this is a show where we get together and recreate the feeling of being in our family. Usually on a Friday night after we go to the movies, we talk about a lot of things in our life through the movie and television watching experience. And today, we are once again inviting another awesome person into our family for the day. We've got a great guest. His name is Noah Austin. Noah, welcome.
Hello, great to be with you.
I'll tell a little bit more about you in a moment, but before I further intro you, I always want to ask how my sisters are doing because they never ask me. Becky, how you doing?
First, I heard that sigh.
Okay, that was cry about it, Shy. I'm great. Yesterday we took my baby to the swimming pool. We took her to the neighborhood swimming pool, and slowly getting her more and more used to the water. I would say was a success. She clung so tight to my neck that she was like digging her tiny little fingers into the back.
Did you have to go in the water?
Oh, I had to go in the water. You could not pry her.
Becky and I were talking about like how gross that water is. That's just like pee chlorinated water.
It's rec swim time, so it's just all kids under 10 just peeing in the pool, and you can feel it. It's like slightly warm. Like you expect the water to be cool, but it's like slightly warm from all the pee. But my daughter, was fairly relaxed in the water this time. We're trying to get her used to swimming. So that was a success. I'm feeling pretty good about that.
That's cool. Lil,
minus the scratch marks on my neck.
Fair enough. Lil, how are you doing?
I'm pretty good. I have a cough. So it made me think, like, I was watching Seth Meyers the other day, and he had a terrible cold, but he's a real person, so it's sort of like he's just talking, whatever he has a cold. But do you ever watch like a sitcom or something, and one of the characters is so clearly sick when they were filming, but they don't write it into the episode? I don't know if that's happened to you. I'm sure you've seen episodes of TV shows. The other day that I don't know what it was, but there's the famous one on Friends where Phoebe's sick.
No, but that gets written into the show.
Into the show, but I feel like there's so many times where I'm watching a show and the character is just so clearly sick, and I'm like, that's so unrealistic. Somebody has to mention, dude,
someone give you a call. Someone
like,
give you a call.
Like somebody pass you a tissue. We're not buying that you're not sick right now. Yeah. So I'm just letting you all know this isn't my normal horse like sex operator Joan Rivers trucker voice. I have a cold.
Especially bad? Okay.
So,
right.
How are you doing, Shy?
How are you doing, Shy?
I'm doing great.
How are you doing?
So I just have one really cool little thing to share from this week. So
especially this week we have like the coolest. Like first you went to India and we got to hear about that crazy hijinks last week. But I asked you how you're doing. Then this week you have an even cooler thing than Shy going to India.
I do.
What?
Yeah, I do.
Shy, we really must have not spoken in the last week. I have no idea what we're referencing.
Because you have no brain cells left because you had a baby. So that's that.
So we all know that I am a huge fan of the TV show The Goldbergs, and I am lucky enough to be a part of the Gold Nerds crew. In fact, right before this, finished taping the podcast for this week with the Gold Nerds, with Ash and Lons and Sana, who was on our show a while ago, the series freak from the Netherlands.
Oh yeah, love her.
So we just did but one of the most amazing things happened, which was that Adam F. Goldberg and the writers, they like to do kind things to the fans because they appreciate them. And this week in the Fiddler on the Roof episode, when the high school teacher puts up the cast list of who is going to be in Fiddler on the Roof, they threw in a bunch of the fans' names as if they were high school students in the show. And I was cast as Muttle the Tailor in
Which
Fiddler on the Roof.
I cannot fathom is a coincidence.
That's like an ongoing bit on the show.
I don't know if you know Fiddler well. I didn't realize that like other people don't know Fiddler on the Roof. By the way,
I just went through this. No one I was talking to.
No one knows it. I guess you have to be Jewish or like 80. I don't know. Either one.
Both, but one or the other.
And for a long time, for years, we have joked that like I married a Spaniard and moved to Spain, and Becky is like with a friggin' like Pixar guy and moved to California and is following the dream of Hollywood.
And he's Russian, like the Russian that Chava marries.
Right. And Becky's like in Hollywood and makes amazing movies and has worked with famous people, blah, blah, blah.
Not
it's 100% true.
It's similar.
And like Shy has like, a house with a fence.
The white picket fence.
White picket fence, like 3 hours from her parents.
Not taking big risks.
He likes to watch the game on a Sunday. A big deal for Shy is like if he stays out past 10 or goes to India. That Shy I want to meet that Shy one day, but that's not the Shy that we're talking about. The one that went to India. And so like
Shy is
this running bit in our family. Shy started. He's like, oh my God, I'm Muttle the tailor. The like boring one on the roof that stays home and is like a tailor. And they cast Shy as Muttle. I can't believe that's a coincidence.
I'm starting to believe Adam listens to our podcast.
Or that mom just has done her own mothering and smothering and has called him up and say, I want Shy to play Muttle. Well, okay. Well, enough of my brief moment
humiliation.
Of stardom. We have an awesome guest. So I'll give a little bit of an intro to how I met Noah. Noah and I earlier this year I was in Jerusalem for this amazing program with the Schusterman Foundation, and one of the options that I got to sign up for was a stop motion animation a couple hours workshop. And while we were working on a project, I struck up this conversation with this super nice guy who it turned out we had a lot in common, not just in terms of love of music and our desire to create an animated gas dragon. This was our big thing that we tried to create together for this stop motion animation thing.
It was going to be epic.
It was going to be epic. We needed like a few more hours, but it was going to be epic.
Yeah.
And then aside from being this wonderful, kind, like nice person that it was fun chatting with, he also happened to slip into conversation that he worked in special effects on some fairly not just big movies, but movies that are extraordinarily important to us, namely Beetlejuice. So we're so lucky to have him on the episode today because we're going to ask him a little bit about some movie history, and then we're also going to just talk about creatures and special effects and things like that, which we haven't geeked out on that much on this show yet, but I know we all have strong opinions. But I'll just start off by welcoming Noah again. Noah, thanks for making time.
Thank you.
So we're going to... go ahead.
No, I was just going to mention that you didn't ask how I was, but I wasn't going to make you feel guilty about that.
Becky and I only care about how each other are doing, so that's not personal.
Yeah.
How are you?
No, I wasn't coming down on you all. I was just pointing it out to Shy. Yeah.
Oh yeah, he's guilty. Guilty as charged.
How are you doing, sir?
Oh, well, now that you ask, very well. No, I'm having a good time. I'm going to be traveling to Atlanta next week to meet with more of the Schusterman folks in Atlanta, but have had fun. I'm kind of on my own this weekend. All the kids, one kid's away at camp, other kids away at the beach with a friend, and so my wife is with them. So I am here alone.
Free to podcast.
Just me and it. Free to podcast and take care of the multitude of animals that we have running around here.
What do you have?
We have 3 dogs and we have 5 guinea pigs right now. And various other animals come in and out of our household. My wife works for a wild care, which is a wildlife rehabilitation hospital in Marin. And so we have various and sundry animals. And whereas most people would like to not have raccoons, my wife loves having raccoons.
Really?
But
Are
I
they
happen to be the one.
aggressive?
Well, so no, they're not really all that aggressive. I have an ongoing battle with one of them of I put garbage in the garbage can and he comes and takes it out of the garbage can at night. And so we have an ongoing little battle, and I devised a mechanism last night that I think I won this round at least.
But he is free to roam your home?
Well, it's not a pet raccoon. That one is just the raccoons that live on the property, but there's no attempt to get rid of them. Right now, no. The only animal that we're rehabilitating is a little tiny guinea pig that I have to feed with a syringe 3 times a day while they're gone.
Cute.
They're really cute. They're really cute. And tying that into movies, they're very much like the Tribbles in Star Trek.
That's
Wait,
a
in Star
great
Trek?
character. Yeah, my sisters are. This
I
is a
don't
little
know.
generation gap thing.
I'm
I'm with you,
like,
Noah. I know the
that
Tribbles
actually.
well. They're these little fuzzy things from an episode of Star Trek.
Yeah,
One
let's
of the-
bring the Tribbles forward into.
Actually, Lily and Becky, it is Mom's favorite episode of Star Trek.
No, I know what
So,
they are.
in case you
I
were
know they
curious
are.
why I am the favorite, because I remember things
Oh,
like
no.
this.
Okay. All right.
I
That's a
lost
different
that
topic for a
curiosity
different
a while
episode, but
ago.
I'm happy.
All
I'm
right.
happy to discuss all the ways in which you are
Wait,
our mother's
just to confirm you're the favorite. I was talking to Dad. My dad's visiting right now, and I was talking to him the other day, and he was like, "Mom is just so." He was just like talking. He's like, "Mom is the best." Mom, I just love Mom so much. Like I miss her because they're not together right now. She's at home and he's here. I just really love her. And I was like, "Yeah." And she gave you 3 amazing kids. And he's like, "Yeah, well, 2." And I was like, "What?" Oh my god! I'm like, "Is that?" Obviously, Shy's one of them, but who's the other one? Like, we
Yeah,
all
that
know
leaves a lot open.
I was like, we all know Shy's one of those too, and he's like, yeah, of course. And then I'm like, oh my god, he's like, let's change the subject.
All right, Noah, we've held ourselves back, but we really want to hear all about You've had many different careers, but you did spend time as a special effects guy, and you worked on Beetlejuice. Lily, would you like to tee up some questions about Beetlejuice, but also give Noah a sense of what this movie means to us from growing up?
I don't know if I could put it into words. I can't remember even when I saw it for the first time. So it's not like I remember when I saw it. Probably Shy, you were watching it, and that's how I saw most of the things as a kid that Shy was watching, and I was just lumped into that activity with Becky, I'm sure. But that movie should have terrified me, and it should have scared the shit out of me. And really, it didn't. Maybe only 1 or 2 scenes, but I was afraid of Never Ending Story. So this, by all intents and purposes, should have given me nightmares. But there's such a beautiful humor and a sweetness throughout the movie that it just comes through and just makes it so joyful, as much as it is also sad and hilarious.
And it has
just Keaton. I don't know if that's what.
No, it also has incredible watchability. It is the type of movie you can watch over and over again. And there's always something funny or weird or strange that you're enjoying about it. And I feel like when I think about the movies we watched on repeat in our childhood, I mean, this is at the top of the list. So much so that in preparation for this episode, I was like, I know that movie off by heart.
Right. So I was like, you guys can watch it. I have it. You guys can watch it. I was like, I can recite it for you. It doesn't matter. I don't need to.
So hearing that, Noah, just as a starting point, how does it feel to have been involved in something that people have that type of relationship with? Did you know at the time this was going to be something special?
Absolutely not. I mean, it's sort of, if you see the trailer for a movie that's, coming, Christmas 2021, that was sort of what Beetlejuice was. It was this weird named movie. I had no idea what it was going to be about. And for me at the time, it was really much more practical than anything else. I was more excited to get a paycheck than to work on a movie at the moment. And so
that makes sense too.
Yeah,
I mean, it is a job. People do it for a living. So
yeah, and it was sort of when I told people that, next week I'm going to start this job. I got a job as a production assistant in the visual effects shop, And it was other people's reaction that sort of teed up my own of, wow, maybe this is actually way cooler than I think it is. And so by the time I got into the shop, it was in Marina Del Rey, California. So it was a community right by the beach. And it was at a little company called Bob Short Productions that was doing all the miniature visual effects for them. And so I walked into this shop, and it was just going to be awesome. I had stars in my eyes. I was going to be like working on a big movie. I walk up to, they say, you should, go talk to Pete over there. Pete was kind of an old, like, stereotypical gruff engineer with the beard and the glasses, and he would kind of look at you down your glasses. And I walk up and introduced myself, and I'm here to work with him. He kind of gives me the once over, and he hands me, I didn't even know they made coffee cans this big, but it was a coffee can filled with miscellaneous nuts and bolts. And he just plops it down in front of me, and he says, sort these. And it was sort of like
the glamorous life of special
effects. Not very glamorous.
It's just, I deflated in the moment, and it was just, wait, this is what it's going to be like? And so I took my can, and I realized I have no idea what any of these are. And so I went back to him and I said, how do you want me to sort this? And so he gave me this, he made a little template, which obviously he had made before. And I only put it together that he had queued this up before I got there. He made a little aluminum plate that had all the different threads. And then he had written, etched in the shapes of all the different heads and the screw types and all of that. And he said, hands me this plate. He's like, I have to screw every single one in? He's like, yep. Go back day after day, and it was probably 2 weeks of doing that. And I every day he would have another coffee can. I had no idea where he got these things. It felt like he was just taking everything I sorted the day before back in the can for me.
Like hazing you?
Yeah, that's what it felt like. It felt like I was just getting hazed. And then one day I walked in to go, and it was sort of like the soup Nazi in Seinfeld. It was like, I'm going to step up, get my coffee can, step to the side. I'm going to go sort my bolts and then come back for my next one. And he looks at me and he says, get me 4 1024 truss head Allens. I was like, okay. I walk over. I was like, I know what that is.
Oh my God, he Miyagi'd you.
He totally Miyagi'd me. He completely wax on. I mean, it was just, completely. And after that, I got to get the bolts, and then I got to sort of make things and put things together. And so that was sort of how it started. So it went from this sort of, wow, fun to work on a movie, to the complete deflated, to now I know how to do something, and it was really fun.
That's wild.
That is so cool. That's such a great story.
All right. In Beetlejuice, so you walked into the room with like the miniatures. Was this the place where they were actually creating like the tiny town and the figures that you would see in the claymation?
Yeah, and I mean, this is what I missed out of, because I watched the trend. Beetlejuice was a fully practical film, and I just watched the transition from that into the completely digital. And walking into the shop at Beetlejuice, you had the beautiful cityscape, you had the map painters. It was the most talented group of artists I've ever had the opportunity to work with. Painters, sculptors, mechanical engineers. I mean, they're all working together to create what hasn't been created before and do it so that it's beautiful. And so it was unbelievable to walk in and see all of that. And you had everybody, the personalities. You had Rob Thorpe, who was playing, he would spray flammable lacquer with a cigarette hanging out of his mouth. And there's just this fog of flammable lacquer, and it's sort of like, okay, you go and spray. And so it was a really interesting group of essentially overgrown little kids, men and women that just never really wanted to grow up and wanted to play around with big toys, and that's what we did. So that was the environment, and it was a really fun experimental environment like that.
And so, what were some of the? I know because we've talked about this, but what are some of the scenes that you got to work on in a hands-on way?
So it ended up, after I was done sorting bolts and nuts and all of that, I actually got to work on way more than I ever realized at the time. And because a lot of the effects were like the flat man, the guy that that goes in the slot.
Oh, one of my favorites.
The eyes, the football players, the half-woman couch, the banister that turns into a snake, which is actually one of my favorites because that was so simple. And yet it ended up looking great in the film, and it was a combination of a static banister that I just sat and glued a bunch of little latex snake scales on and then painted it to sort of blend with the snake, to the big mechanical end of the snake where we had 3 sets of 2 levers, and I operated one, so you could have this big snake on cables go and open its mouth and turn from side to side, and we all had to sort of work together on these giant aluminum levers that we had built. So that was one of the really fun ones. But it was also just like Charman and Head Shrunken Dude.
That's
favorite.
a classic. That is
the best.
Shrunken
Head. It's really fun. And so you take latex and paper towels. You can do wonders with latex and paper towels, and you can make Charman, you can make Head Shrunken Dudes, you can make all sorts of fun things.
So is Charman the guy who's smoking the cigarette that says something like, "These things will kill you"?
Yeah.
So could you
Yes.
give us a little bit of that movie magic? Like you said, paper towels and latex. Like how does that Charman become Charman?
So Charman becomes Charman because latex and paper towels with gray and black paint look like you've just come out of a fire. And so when you kind of layer it onto a mask that can be put on, and Charman had eyes, but it's really just a mask made out of latex and paper towels. And once you let the latex set, it becomes a rubber mask that looks like a charm. Yeah, it looks burned.
That's wild.
amazing.
Have you any of these skills that you learned while working in the shop and on the film, have you applied them to later in your life when you moved, past working in production?
What are your kids' Halloween costumes?
Yeah, that's basically what I'm getting at.
We're getting.
There's I'll get to that in a minute because it's I think mildly disappointing. I've tried to get my kids way more into it than they kind of are.
Okay.
And so it's as much as I can push it as a dad, as parents,
Sure.
you have limited authority there. But the lessons, there were a lot of skills for sure in terms of basic shop skills. I learned how to machine metal. I learned how to weld. I learned how to paint. I learned how to build things. But back then it was truly mechanical, which was nice. There was no computer to kind of make up the difference for you. So everything had to be thought of. Everything had to be done manually. And so that to me created a sense of problem solving or ability to solve problems. And I firmly believe there is not a single problem in the world that cannot be solved. And I think that we're going to laugh someday, don't know when, we're going to laugh someday when they say, what do you mean you can't divide by 0? Of course you can. And we always forget that the world was flat at one point. And so what it instilled in me...
still is, depending who you ask.
That's a real deep rabbit hole, yes. But it gave me a sense of possibility and that anything is possible. And so that I think was one of the best things that I learned out of it. And now that we live in a world where so the digital and the physical can come together, it just opens up worlds of new possibilities for that.
Well, okay, so there's so many questions, but that leads me to ask with Tim Burton specifically, but then you extrapolating on other types of films, then obviously later in his films he used digital special effects clearly, and then today there is Avengers. I'm not sure what is real in one of those movies. It's all special effects, and then sometimes they hire the actors to appear. Do you, having seen it up close and personal, how do you feel about? Is it just never going to be as good, or there's some stuff that you see today and you're like, wow, that is so much better than what we could have done?
Well, better in some ways and not in others. And so from a kind of artisan's standpoint, there's a disappointment. There's a sense of loss, and that I know I worked with these sculptors, these painters, these people that were just unbelievable artists. Now, is somebody who designs that in a computer an equivalent level of artist? Yeah, they're just using a different tool. I happen to not love that tool as much as the physical, because there are things, it'll take care of gravity for you. It'll take care of all of these physics for you. Then that was a big deal of trying to compensate for all of those kinds of things, especially in in miniature. To make a miniature car crash like a big car is hard.
Oh, that scene is so good.
But to do it with a computer, you can tell it, okay, the car weighs 2,612 pounds, and it's going to hit an immobile object, and it will calculate all the physics for you.
That's awesome.
And so that in and of itself is really cool. But I think that what Tim Burton did, he had such a great whimsical sense of imagery, and I think that did carry over into the digital versions of his work as well. And so that's
right.
I think, and that's really what drove Beetlejuice to where it is in our history.
Do you have we talked about the snake. Do you have a favorite creature or character from Beetlejuice that you worked on, or maybe one that you didn't work on, but one that just captures your imagination to this day?
So the one that I think that I always go back to, and it was one of the lesser known creatures in Beetlejuice, was the fly, the mechanical fly.
Yeah.
Because that was the thing that was when Pete asked me to go get him the bolts, that was the thing I went and got the bolts for, was to start to build a little mechanical fly. And so it was the first thing that I really got, we're going to build a little tiny robot. And for me as a 15-year-old kid, it was just boing, eyes open, we're going to build robots. This is awesome. This is what I wanted to do. And so it was that one sticks with me.
That's really cool. Okay, so speaking of favorite creatures and characters, Halloween just happened. We're talking Beetlejuice. Every once in a while, we'll delve into top lists of things. We've talked about our favorite movies from different eras in the past.
I mean, because literally, I could do Beetlejuice for several hours. So, I'm pained right now that we're moving on.
Well,
that's okay.
We're gonna thread in some Beetlejuice.
We're gonna keep talking.
We're gonna
about
thread
it.
in. We're gonna thread in more of Noah's stories
I feel
as everything goes on.
does this happen to you all the time? That people just does your wife just want to talk Beetlejuice with you? Is that weird?
She does not. This is the first time I've talked about it this much in a long time. It's really fun.
Okay. At least it's refreshing.
Yes.
So we're going to talk about now our top list of movie creatures, and any movie was game. Any movie was game for this, but it had to be a practical effect. It couldn't be a recent digital. It couldn't be a recent digital character. Sorry, Rocket Raccoon, you're awesome, but you're not.
He's a great example.
He's a good example, or
he's
Gollum.
a good example.
Great examples, but they're not going to be the ones that we talk about now.
Right.
And so let's kind of do a round and do the first 5 from everybody, starting with Becky.
Okay, I didn't put mine in any particular order, but I can tell you. Well, the first 2 are definitely in order, which is
to be in top.
Okay, top
whatever.
couple.
Five from your list. So in the movie Where the Wild Things Are, because they made a movie. Spike Jonze made a movie. I don't know, 10 years ago. When was it? All the Wild Things creatures. Those were all practical. They're actually wearing the suits with the giant heads, and I don't remember, but it's something crazy. The heads were so heavy and these suits were so big they could only wear them for 8 minutes at a time or 10 minutes at a time to have to take breaks in between, and they're so beautiful. So that for sure. Morla from Neverending Story, she's the turtle that he goes to see. I think that's just one of those beautiful.
To this day, I so want to know if she was actually large scale. I'm assuming she wasn't. Because in my mind, they needed to
So wait, let's ask.
Build her.
Let's ask an expert.
Yes.
I mean, you didn't work on Neverending Story, but
or was she?
I did not work on a Never-Ending Story, but one of the things I did learn is that it is extremely difficult to tell, when done right, what's big and what's small. And
exactly.
Yes, and that's part of the art in the practical effects, is getting a little boat to bob in the water so it doesn't look like a cork, and getting the
making it look heavy enough.
So exactly. So the fact that you can't tell means that it was really done well.
Okay. She's incredible. Then I would say Gizmo. That's a childhood affection for Gizmo.
Oh, that's...
Fuzzy. I always wanted to just cuddle
Becky
him.
did say her list was going to beat ours.
Yeah.
She's not wrong.
Audrey II, because Audrey II.
Oh, you really are.
Day I
Becky
was-
wants...
I'm like,
Becky
Becky needs to go
wins.
back to not preparing for the shows because normally she doesn't and has no good answers, and now she's schooled us.
And Shy, as much as you are. No, wait, you. No, sorry.
He does like
Sorry,
Pan's
sorry.
Labyrinth.
No, you
Pan's
do like
Labyrinth is a masterpiece. It's one of
the
my favorite
terrifying
movies.
eyeball man from Pan's
Oh, the
Labyrinth.
Pale Man.
hand.
Oh,
Pale Man,
wow.
or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Eyeball hand.
I
And he,
can't
like-
believe I didn't put... I'm not going to, like, retroactively fix my list, but I didn't put any Guillermo del Toro, which I should be punished for. But I would go with the Fawn over the Pale Man, but either way...
No, I think just the Pale, because I mean, these are things that, oh, God, it's so scary. I can't even watch.
Yeah, and what's interesting there is that he clearly could have used digital effects if he wanted to, but chose the
created a practical.
All right.
It's terrifying.
All right, Noah, how about some of yours?
So, in looking at this question, it was kind of funny because I look back and Beetlejuice is definitely my favorite creatures of all time. And it was because I was most attached to them. I just loved the whimsy. I loved the problems that we had to figure out in there. But what happened after that is sort of, I learned how the sausage was made. And
I was going to say that ruined exactly.
So, exactly. And so looking at a lot of the films, I got much more attached to the craft than the creatures. And the story and the portrayal. And so that's why I said Yoda has been a mentor in many ways, because Yoda was like, he was wise. I wanted to sit down and talk with Yoda. I wanted to have a relationship with Yoda. And he's this little puppet. And, but he's so fantastic in that what he did in the movies, but also just how he moved, how he was portrayed, like all of the effects in regarding Yoda were something that I loved. But then in looking back at the effects that I really admire, a lot of them are the effects that you don't see in the films. And so something as simple as like Day for Night. And I worked at a company called Rhythm and Hues for a while. And this was digital and it was compositing, but it wasn't paintings. It was taking images of sunsets, images of things, images of real stuff, and then mashing them all together. And to me, that was one of the most amazing kinds of effects, of being able to take the practical effects, put them into a scene, light them, put shadows, all of that stuff, so that you really couldn't tell what was practical, what was digital, and what was real or not. And we used to sit in the dailies every day, and one of the games we would play is to try to pick out the effects. And a lot of times we couldn't even find them because they were so well integrated in. It wasn't the obvious creature. It was, no, this was filmed at 10 in the morning, and I put the sky in there, and it's all nighttime now. And
that's really cool. Okay, cool. All right, Lily, who are some of yours?
My number one is Mini Beetlejuice head. That is my number one for all time. When he trades the number, and the tribal guy gives him. He trades the number. He's like, because he one is the closer. He's like the next number, and the tribal guy puts the magic dust on his head and shrinks his head. I can't.
That has always been your favorite.
Yeah, I can't deal with that scene. It's like my favorite thing ever. Any hands down creature from the labyrinth. Not one is better than the other. Every single one gets me. I find them all amazing. Like Becky, you had written a few, and Chad, you wrote a few, but to me, it's like just every single part of that movie, including David Bowie as a practical special effects creature. Those are serious pants that he's wearing. Like, I don't know what's in his pants as special effects, but they're very tight in that movie. But yeah, like that movie blew me away as a kid, still blows me away. And do you guys remember Flight of the Navigator?
Yeah.
That worm creature?
No.
Flight of the Navigator was part of that E.T. era of children or creatures being kidnapped, and it somehow being warm, like a family movie about kidnapping.
Do you remember what I'm talking about?
Warm fuzzy aliens.
Yeah, the little guy who's in his bag that stays with him.
Yeah.
No.
As a kid, that amazed me. I love that movie. Kind of scared me, but
it was very. I mean, it seemed small. Who knows if it was really big?
I don't. Yeah. Again. Now I have so many more questions. And then, of course, Falcor. Falcor is the greatest creation, I think, in terms of like an animal mascot, like sidekick. I don't know why there has never been a combination of a dog and a dragon since, or like there's so many ripoffs and spin-offs of so many
fish,
characters,
right?
And he's part fish. Yeah, he can he can breathe underwater.
Yeah. Obviously.
And maybe speak underwater. But I can't believe if all this stuff gets ripped off. You know, Transformers. How many times have Transformers been like? My kid watches these Super Wing shows and the police cars show, and they're all just Transformers that look less scary. But no one's ripped off Electragon, which is fine. I'm just impressed because I think that's the greatest. And now I'm also wondering, was he big? Because in my mind, he's massive.
I think he was huge.
Do you think they made him huge? I don't want to know. I will be so sad if he's just like a tiny, like gerbil sized.
No, I think there's a museum where like the original one is like rotting, but it's quite big. Like the original one is rotting in some museum in Germany or something like that. And I think I picked that up when we did our Neverending Story episode. Mm-hmm. So for me, the all-time greatest, most terrifying, mysterious, captivating creature ever on film is the alien from Aliens, the xenomorph.
You're the only one who knows like the actual name.
The name, yes, I didn't know that. I had to look that up.
When did they say the name xenomorph? Like, is that ever said in the movies?
No, it's just
you like talk with your friends. And you just like, I love that xenomorph more. Like,
that's not a thing. No one knows that's what it's called.
Like it's a thing. Like Shy is definitely using that term with certain groups of people, and it's totally normal, which is weird.
So, to me, the H.R. Giger design is the mix of the organic and the inorganic, I guess, and the fact that you can't see any eyes in that creature and that it is a killing machine. With every time they've tried to explain the backstory of the alien, I regret knowing what I know, because nothing beats the mysteriousness and the haunting figure that first alien is. And when you originally only see little parts of it, but you desperately want to see more. Like, I love the way they put together the alien, and they change it in every movie just a little bit. Every artist kind of adjusts it, or they find plot reasons to adjust the way the alien is built. And to me, there isn't a cooler one that's ever been created.
Also, I'm sure it was done before, and it's been done so many times since. The little more scary actual alien living inside the head of something bigger.
Oh, the mouth inside the mouth?
I feel like it's been done a lot since.
I know it's been done a ton since. I don't know like that much about this genre to say that it hadn't been done before, but
the genesis of the xenomorph.
Yes,
your limited knowledge.
I have limited knowledge on the genesis of the xenomorph. Exactly. But my gosh, since then has it been used? And that's still the best version.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so to me that one is perfection. And then just a couple other I won't by the way, for the Labyrinth, I love the head poppers. They'll always be my favorite. And Jabba the Hutt, and I'll throw this back to Noah also to weigh in on this. So Jabba the Hutt, there was a documentary. It was called From Star Wars to Jedi, and it like came in your box set of Star Wars trilogy, the one that we got in Atlanta at the CNN building in like the 80s or the 90s when we were on vacation, Lily and Beck. I don't know if you remember this.
I remember CNN. I don't remember the box set.
And it came with, and so like there was like a fourth tape, and the fourth tape was this story of the making of all the Star Wars movies, and there was a whole section in it on the creation of Jabba the Hutt and how Jabba the Hutt was puppeted by 4 or 5 people, maybe 5 people.
So he was big.
Yeah, he was huge.
I feel like we're telling people that Santa Claus doesn't exist if we say he was small.
No, he's
big.
He's big.
He's big.
And not only that, they showed a model of what the plan was. So, like, where one guy's arm was, where another guy's arm was. There was one guy's job who was to puff smoke with a cigar or something like that to be Jabba's smoke, and someone ran the tongue.
The tongue. I knew you were going to have to bring that up.
And so to me, Jabba the Hutt was also my earliest memory of really seeing the magic of special effects. And so I kick it back to Nour to get his thoughts on Jabba the Hutt or any other such character that requires so many people.
Well, I mean, the coordination of many people puppeteering a single animal that looks real in any way whatsoever is incredibly difficult. So I always admired that, and that is part of the practical, because in digital you can the computer will move it all any way you want it to move, and so it's a lot easier to coordinate that stuff. So big puppets like that were fascinating, not only from the standpoint of how do you coordinate everybody to get them to move, but also how do you mechanically build this thing so that the eyes move in the way you want them to move, the tongue sticks out and is slimy and gooey on camera. So that stuff has always been incredible.
And how do they get, so like Jabba the Hutt has very emotive eyes. How do you get emotive eyes on a giant rubber mask like that? Like when Jabba the Hutt's being strangled and his eyes bulge out and his tongue sticks out, I to this day believe Princess Leia is strangling the hell out of him.
Also, it doesn't look hokey.
Yeah.
Like it could have looked hokey.
Yeah. No, it doesn't. It doesn't. And that's the magic of a really good puppeteer, and that's, I think, what Jim Henson kind of pioneered, was you felt an emotional connection to Muppets. Like even though they were kind of funny and all of that, you could kind of look them in the eye. They had expressions that were recognizable, even though they were Muppet expressions. And that, I think, is what translated into Yoda, but it also translated into a lot of the other kind of creature and puppeteering work that started to happen after that. In that was the expectation that if you're going to put a puppet in front of me, I'm going to look the puppet in the eyes, and if you hurt the puppet, I'm actually going to feel bad for the puppet.
Well, there's something to be said for the fact that regardless that it's people behind there, it's real. Like, it's a physical thing, whereas as much as, like, Kung Fu Panda's super cute and all these, like, digital characters can be super cute and we can feel for them, there'll always be one step removed. It's not the same as, I think, a puppet like that.
It's totally not the same, and you'll see that, and an example of that is in the movie Gravity, where they're trying to get the image of people floating in space. And so they used industrial robots to turn people over. But the one thing you have a really hard time controlling on Earth is gravity. And so the skin on the face faces down when they're facing down. You can see it kind of go back when they're facing back. So it's not really in space where it would actually be weightless. And so it's really hard to overcome those kinds of things. But in a computer can actually compensate for that. But if your eye will pick it up as something's not quite right, but you're not quite sure what it is. And what it is gravity is actually pulling on things in a way that your eye is picking up, but your brain might not be able to realize.
Ooh.
So it's all those tiny little subtleties, and I think for like Jabba the Hutt, when he moves, he like bounces and stuff, and there's like a bunch of gelatinous crap in there that bounces around so that he looks sort of real.
Right.
You get that your eye picks that up, your brain is used to seeing the way those things move, and that makes a huge difference.
That's awesome. Okay, so some of these, like Jabba the Hutt, hold up. Some of these maybe don't so much anymore. And Lily raised the idea of...
here's my whole... My whole question was, okay, there's clearly things that were scary, practical special effects that were scary when we were kids, that we were scared of. But that my question is that today they still hold up and I find them scary. But how is it possible? Is it possible that any kid, like your 12-year-old or any kid in 2018 who's watching these movies would ever think they're scary?
I would say...
And do I only think they're scary because they scared me as a child and I'm still a scaredy cat? Or
based on my kids are far more scared of films with practical effects than films with CGI.
Okay, well, that's a good...
See, that's interesting. Okay.
So, like, Goonies scared my kids much more than Pirates of the Caribbean. Pirates of the Caribbean, they were hyper aware that the skeletons were essentially cartoons. Whereas, Goonies, which has skeletons and has Sloth, who at first is a little bit scary, and has the Fratellis, who they aren't special effects, they're just terrifying.
They're just terrifying people.
The tangibility of all of that scares my kid. Now, granted, they're my kids, so they're apt to be scared of anything.
True.
Yet at the same time desensitized because you let them watch.
So
stuff
what are
they
some?
absolutely
So what?
shouldn't watch.
What are some of the ones that for you, Lily, that are on your list for that?
Oh, on my list, the melting face scene in Poltergeist. I don't know if you've seen that enough times. That when when I look in the mirror, when she looks in the mirror, and she looks in the mirror. No, he.
I don't know. I haven't seen it.
I can't.
I haven't been able to sit there.
I
I saw the steak move and I turned it off.
the steak move on the table.
Yeah.
No, when the chairs, this is something that's so simple. When the chairs are on the table, the chairs have moved, and the four of us could have gone in there, put the chairs on the table, and then just yelled action. Yet I watched that, and I was like, oh my god, the chairs moved. I believed all of that. And when the face melts from looking in the mirror, the face falls off, I was terrified. And I wonder if if a teenager saw that today, they'd be like, oh, that's ridiculous. Yet they watched, I don't know, what's that one? I can't really think of the name in Spanish. It's embarrassing. The Haunted or one of those movies. The Spanish title has nothing to do with the English title, so never mind. But today they find movies really scary. I don't know. I also wrote the Never Ending Story scared me. The Never Ending Story, The Wolf, and Never Ending Story. I don't think that would scare anybody today.
No, I don't think that would.
So do you remember you made me watch Darkman 50,000 times?
I love that movie.
With Liam Neeson. And that's just a bandage. People dress like that for Halloween. It's just bandages. And they cut off that guy's finger with the cigar cutter. I've never been able to look at a cigar cutter. All of that just scared me so much. And then when Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis changed their faces.
Is that not scary anymore?
I don't know if that would be scary today. Maybe your kids would laugh, but when they stretch out their faces to haunt in the movie, that scared the shit out of me.
No, is that one that you were involved with, the stretching of the faces, where they put the hand in the head and...
The end result. So I worked on the long one where they pull it out. So I helped sculpt the end result there, and then the rest they did animation. They did a claymation version of it to get there.
Right.
Wow.
Wait, I have a question about. I'm sorry, I'm doing a take on this question, Lil. So my question on the question is not whether or not things are scary today, but certain things that we found scary. To me, anything that was slimy and melty automatically felt really scary. How did they make things I'm thinking about The Thing and The Fly, which I don't find scary now. I just find them disgusting. How do they make the skin look melty?
Well, that's kind of in Poltergeist.
Yeah, exactly.
Face falls off.
Stuff that I just find it makes me want to barf. But especially as a kid, it was terrifying.
There's all sorts of food products that get used. The gelatin, blood is corn syrup and food coloring, and so there are a lot of different kinds of food products that get used because they're non-toxic. If you happen to eat a little bit of it, it might taste bad, whatever. But it's a lot of them are non-chemical. If in my days, I tried to avoid the harsh chemical stuff, although I ended up using a lot of it. The best one was for Batman and Robin to make fake ice. Which is,
how did you have to use?
So the Batman and Robin, it was interesting because they had three different teams compete to create the ice effects, and they had model makers who kind of modeled it out of plastic, and then they had sculptors who sculpted it out of clay, and then I took a different approach because the guy I was working with, he and I specialized in some of the natural phenomena simulation, and so we would do things very differently in that. So I worked with a chemist to create a water clear polyurethane that we could dip in liquid nitrogen, and it would maintain its certain properties like flexibility and things like that.
Whoa.
But that I could also hypercatalyze it so that within 1 second I could get the entire batch to flash cure. And so what I did was I timed it so that I had a 20-second cure time, and so that gave me 19 or 18 seconds to mix it, 1 second to pull the mixer out, and another second to kick the bucket against the wall. And then as the bucket was flying through the air and hitting the wall, it would start to harden up and freeze in these beautiful organic clear shapes.
What?
It was super cool.
Can you do that right
slam
now
against the wall.
on this phone
I would
call?
love to. I had to wear
What
an
are the
independent air supply. It was a really, really nasty.
It seems dangerous a little bit.
It was pretty nasty. I had, because you're kicking a fuming bucket of liquid. I had to have an independent air supply, so I had a hose coming in the back, had a full face shield in case it splashed on me.
What would have happened if it splashed on you?
It would burn you. It got really hot, and if I had left it to cure in the bucket, it would catch on fire because it would be too big of a mass, and it would get too hot. So I had to kick it so it would spread thin, and then it would cure. But it would cure into this semi-rigid, like super water clear, perfectly clear stuff, and we could dip it in liquid nitrogen and then catapult it onto a stage. And I had 3 versions of it. One version was rigid that would stay on the car. Another version was semi-rigid, so it would flop around kind of, and another version was rigid and it would actually shatter and not adhere to the car. And so we would use a combination of those 3 different materials so that when the car gets catapulted onto the stage, some of it shatters and breaks off the car, some of it sticks on the car. But we were asked, what does it look like when a car gets hit with a freeze gun? And that sort of goes back to why I loved that business so much, because anything's possible. You're not sitting there saying, well, we don't have freeze guns. You're saying, oh, well, if there's a freeze gun, then it's going to have this. And you're trying to actually think how a freeze gun would work.
Amazing.
And so I love that kind of mode of thought.
Briefly, since you brought up Batman and Robin, how many people were involved in the special effects of George Clooney's nipples?
So I worked in the heavy miniatures division, and I think his nipples fall outside heavy miniatures.
Yeah, gotcha.
They might have been heavy, but they weren't miniature for that movie.
They were not.
So, okay.
In fact, as cool as that ice story is, the nipples unfortunately steal the show of that.
No, it's a very cool story.
There are many things that stole the show from that movie, and not necessarily in a great way.
But I will say
the special effects are amazing.
One of the enduring parts, one of the enduring things about that movie is the Mr. Freeze component of it. Both the hilarious clips you can see of all of Schwarzenegger's great lines, but now knowing the story behind it, it's even cooler. But I always loved the visuals and the color scheme that they used to do the Mr. Freeze stuff in that movie. I think that is a real bright spot in that movie. So it's pretty cool to be able to tell someone who actually worked on it that was really, really cool.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
And even something as simple as I was always curious about it, like when you see people's breath in movies when they're cold. Right, it's not always that cold. So, how do you do something as simple as see Schwarzenegger's cold breath? When is he smoking a cigar?
Sometimes it's cold. Sometimes they'll have something that they'll have in their mouth that'll give them that little piece of fog, and sometimes it's CG. And I actually don't know what it was in that film. Because again, when Heavy Miniatures was the division, Warner Brothers had their miniatures, which is the kind of tabletop. Heavy Miniatures, which is the division where we were in. We rented out the Van Nuys Airport, it was miniature.
I was going to say for miniatures, you needed a large.
Exactly. And actually for the miniature, to get that observatory up as high as we needed it to get the scale correct, and that was one of my favorite jobs. I had to stick icicles to the bottom of the floor 60 feet up in the air, hanging out of a little basket, and there was primer cord explosives wired in the floor above me because we were going to blow the floor, and that was that whole explosion scene. And so I was the only one that was allowed to go up there and stick the icicles underneath the explosively wired floor.
Because they didn't care if you lived or died, or you had a special insurance plan.
So I preferred to. In my head, I prefer to look at it as I was the only one that had the skill, but maybe it was that I was the only one that was expendable.
I mean, was your special skill set.
Wow,
either way,
that's awesome.
That's crazy.
I got to do a Batman Robin rewatch with all this in mind. This is wild.
Yes, and one last little note on that.
Oh yeah, please.
To give you the heavy miniature version, in order to get the observatory up that high, we outbid an Argentinian mining company for one of 2 container movers on the planet that could lift the shipping containers. I think it was more than 6 containers high from the ground. And so we had this gigantic container mover that you'd see at like a dock, you know, to move industrial stuff onto ships. And we could drive it around the Van Nuys airport and put like these giant containers, and we would have races with the condors, which are those little baskets that you get in. You go 60 feet up in the air, and you go straight up, and you have races down the tarmac on them, because there was no safety. I mean, very little safety stuff. We were a bunch of overgrown man boys kind of playing around with big toys, and so it was really
I'm looking
fun.
at a picture of it right now of the scene, and and it's pretty wild.
That's awesome.
That's pretty wild. How much of it was practical then? Like
all of that was practical.
Like, yeah, like that's amazing.
And it took, for each of those, we did, I think, 3 or 4 takes, as I recall, and it was about a month or so to reset after each scene. And so there's a month of work, and then that evening where you're going to blow the floor, and it's kind of, you've got, 7, 8 cameras all running, and you hear them, like the high-speed motors kick in, and then kaboom! And so it was fun to watch that. But it took about a month to reset each time.
That's wild.
And not to go back to Beetlejuice, but to go back to Beetlejuice for a second. What I'm saying here is that Beetlejuice is 1988, and it is his first movie for all intents and purposes, right? Like, he'd had TV shows before, like episodes.
Had he done Pee-wee at that point? Didn't he?
Maybe he did Pee-wee. Maybe he had done. I have to check. Maybe he had done Pee-wee.
So he did Pee-wee. Pee-wee's Big Adventure was the one before this.
Okay.
It was the one before Beetlejuice, and then Batman.
85. Right. So he does Pee-wee, which I don't think you can go from Pee-wee to Beetlejuice and be like, oh, well, that makes sense.
There are connections, though. There was a lot of claymation in Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
not his artistry, but his success, his public success, and like people believing in him and being like, this makes sense. You know what I mean? Like that. It's so wacky, it's so out there, and it works so well. All the people involved have to believe in it. Like, yes, it's just a job, you get paid, sure, but like you said, people who are doing the animatronics and the puppetry and all that stuff, like that, and I guess you didn't know it was going to be what it was. You have something like Batman, who's part of such a canon of story and history and all that. And they let you rent out an airport and give you, obviously quite a budget for that. I just find it pretty impressive that Tim Burton pretty much started with Beetlejuice, and Shai, you had a previous question that we skipped over, but I am curious that for you, Noah, can it be magical all these years later, having been part of it, in terms of, especially when you think about the rest of Tim Burton's career?
Well, it's more magical the more I talk to people about it, and that one of the things that actually got me out of visual effects was the feeling that I wasn't contributing to a better world. In that, I was I was entertaining people, but in the end, I was wasting a lot of materials. I was doing a lot of things that I wasn't okay with, and so to kind of revisit that through the lens of, I worked on this thing that made a lot of people really happy, and that's actually worth something. It's helped me sort of see it in a different lens, and so it's been really nice to be able to talk to people about, oh, that movie just made me happy. I love that movie. And so the feeling like, oh, I actually did contribute something, and it was something that helped people. So it's nice to look back at it, and that to me is where some of the magic of movies always has been, is our ability to kind of connect to a character, our ability to think about something a little bit differently, think about something that's possible that wasn't possible before you saw the movie, and it's just that sense of imagination, and I try to keep that alive in my kids as well, because I don't want them to just be, that's just latex and paper towels, whatever. It's like,
right.
No. It is.
That was that's a really good answer. All
right. So as we could talk to Noah forever, but I know he's got his bachelor weekend here to enjoy.
He has to feed
and he's got to feed the guinea pig.
Yes,
so
I have to feed guinea pigs.
We'll shift to our last segment, and we'll put what we're watching and shout-outs in the same place, but since we were talking about Batman, I'm going to take the first shot on what we're watching. I have been watching Titans on DC Universe's app, but apparently it's Netflix internationally. And this is the story of Robin and a couple of the other younger superheroes. And it's one of the times where they've done it as a dark show, and I actually really like it, and it's working really well. I think it's terrific. I am offering a tradesies to my sisters. I will watch the Outlander season premiere this week if you watch the first episode of DC's Titans.
I will watch DC Titans if you let me, on a private phone call between me and you set aside like an hour and a half of your life, and I get to tell you what happens in season 2 and 3.
No, I would. That's going to be. We can keep that as like a bonus episode.
That's
of the
like
podcast.
a birthday present for me.
Okay, fine. So
I like a lot
this
of
week,
detail.
the tradesy has been. Noah's our witness. The tradesy has been made. The other thing is, I'll just say, and we'll talk about this when you guys get around to seeing it. Saw Bohemian Rhapsody last night. It was amazing. Critics.
I'm very curious because I've been reading articles, and you normally are very critical, especially with Queen.
Here's the thing.
So,
my biggest thing on movies is does a movie deliver on its promise? Without even seeing a preview, I wanted to see a movie that was going to teach me about Freddie Mercury and go into the ups and downs of his life and the difficult things he had to deal with, was going to show me how amazingly talented was, and blow me away with performances of Queen's amazing music. And it did all of those things, and Rami Malek, definitely an Oscar candidate for his performance. There are definitely things you can quibble. I think there's discussion to be had about the movie, and they mess with the timeline a little bit. But like, these are the people who also complain that like, oh, they jazzed up the end of Argo to make it more interesting. I'm like, it's still a movie. It's still an interpretation of the guy's life.
It's a story.
And they have to make it exciting. And I rewatched. So the end of the movie. Just a few songs from the Live Aid show. I rewatched the whole Live Aid show this morning, and it's just awesome. So I highly recommend that. And then as far as shout-outs, I want to shout out to my new buddy Nour, who she drew a cool picture of me that I posted on Instagram. She did a little portrait of me, so I promised her a big shout-out this week, and she's been listening to the podcast. This actor named Emmett Hunter, who plays Gerard Duquette on Stand Against Evil, which is a show that I love and has a lot of practical effects as well. He and I have been going back and forth on Instagram, and he is going to be a featured character in my Stanimation this week, which is going to be a Stand Against Evil themed animation that I'm making this week. So he's been very cool, so I wanted to give a shout out to him. He's a super talented guy, and his scenes in the first episode of the season were terrific. And I'll hand it over to Lil. What do you got?
I've had like an off week. I'm not going to lie. I've had a tough week. And the things that I've seen make me ask the question, when is too many questions when you're watching something? Like, I'm a talker, so I get that, like, I'll ask some questions and people shush me. But I watched Sicario, the Winter Soldado, or whatever that. I cannot.
Day of the Soledad?
No, it's like when there's a colon in your title, you gotta be like a Star Wars movie to warrant that. So you make one movie with Josh Brolin and you think you can now put a colon. I find it a bit presumptuous. So I watched that, and my dad and Jose were sitting there. We were literally just like a lot of questions. And I'm like, this movie is about hitmen, like South American hitmen. I don't think it needs to be this complex. And I love Taylor Sheridan, the writer. He wrote the first one, and he's written
Did Denis Villeneuve direct it?
No, that guy's extremely busy with his HBO shows, so I'm sure he's done with colon sequels.
He's on an HBO show.
Didn't he? Oh no, sorry, that I mixed up with the other Quebecer.
No, Denis Villeneuve did French.
Yes,
Blade Runner.
Yeah.
Arrivals.
And Arrivals, and the one with Gyllenhaal and Hugh Jackman, also the thief.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, anyway, sorry.
Lily, list every French Canadian made movie. Quick, go.
She interrupted.
All right, let's go. Barre-Bottine. Let's go.
Les Barbapapa.
Okay. Oh, I'm thinking of that cartoon, and I want you to find it on YouTube.
Hurry it up. Some people have small children to get to.
Okay. What I'm saying, or guinea pigs. I get it. I'm going. What I'm saying is that.
Wait, you're still saying something?
Oh my God! Okay. Moving on. You lost your time slot.
Just too many questions, and I started watching Altered Carbon on Netflix, which seems like a very cool concept that you could Minority Report.
Starring stunt woman Caitlin Deschelle.
Is she in that?
Yeah.
Mazel tov for her. It's wonderful for her. The point is that the concept is really great. Again, just too complicated. Why can't we scale things back in terms of story? I don't want to have to ask this many questions for it to be interesting. I think people are confused that you need to confuse the shit out of them so your show's good. And that's not the same as making it interesting and having you on the edge of your seat. So I'm not that impressed with movies and TV this week.
Okay.
That's all I'm saying.
What about you, Beck?
I have to look at my notes, which I wrote down. I actually want to talk about something I'm excited to watch. I'm excited to watch Homecoming. It just premiered on Amazon Prime. I haven't seen it yet, but I'm a huge fan of the podcast, so I will watch that this week and report back. Did I talk last week about 8th grade?
You've talked about 8th grade before.
Okay, well then skipping over, listen to last week's episode, or maybe it was the week before.
No, I don't think she did. She talked about it in our chat.
You've mentioned 8th grade a bunch of times, though. Or maybe I just feel like...
It is required watching for everyone. It's so good. It's painful. It's just watch it.
And you had a terrible time in 8th grade.
No, it's fine for me. 6th grade.
Oh, 6th grade. 6th grade. Sorry. Whatever.
But I just feel like it's very... It really feels like a documentary, even though it's definitely... fiction. It's so well made. It just is so real. And anyways, so those are the things that I recommend 8th grade. I'm excited to watch Homecoming, and I'm crushing Money Heist. So still working on that, but loving it. And I want to give a shout out to my friend Isabel. We've been going to dance class once a week together. It's really good.
Isagram, right? Isn't that her?
Instagram, yeah. Instagram. Mm-hmm. And then Jamil, because I love her Instagram account. I have to say, it's the best part of my day is seeing, not the best part, but a highlight of my day is whatever she's posting.
The Good Place.
From The Good Place. She's so funny. She plays Tahani on The Good Place. If you just need a good laugh, follow her Instagram account. I also feel like as a woman, it's very encouraging. So I really do love her funny posts.
Yeah, she's super smart. And I recommend, there's an episode of the JV Club with Janet Varney that she is a guest on that is really terrific. Noah, how about you? Is you watching anything cool? Yeah, anything to recommend? Anyone you'd like to shout out to?
So I've had fun with Deadpool and the Marvel Universe, the movie. I'm getting to share
kind of sound like you were hanging out with Deadpool though. I've had fun with Deadpool.
We've just been chilling out, and he's got a good sense of humor, stuff, just hanging out at the bar and whatever. Fitting in.
I had to ask. You mean the movie, right? Because I was there for a second.
So watch. I've enjoyed those. I'm very much enjoying sharing the Marvel universe with my younger daughter, who has now become interested in that, and she is understanding my love of Tony Stark's workshop, and that I desperately want his. He has the best workshop ever. Mine lacks Jarvis among so many other really nice features.
And just out of curiosity, his beats the one in in James Bond movies, the Ben Whishaw workshop. Is it his name is Hugh?
Q.
Yes.
Yeah. Iron Man workshop better than James Bond workshop.
So it's just updated. I think it's like Tony Stark is sort of the Q's Workshop 2.0. It's sort of take everything from the 70s and 80s that was cool then, and now put it into, now you got voice control, you got all sorts of really cool stuff. Jarvis can pretty much make anything. It's rad. Yeah.
That's awesome. Awesome. Cool. Becky, where can people follow you?
Follow me on Twitter at PaperBKPrincess.
And Lily?
That's it.
You can follow me. Now that when I say it out loud and no one has not heard this podcast before, I'm embarrassed by my own handle. Handle embarrassment? Does that happen? That's like when you were in high school and you made your Hotmail email or something. It was like the dumbest thing ever, and it followed you for so many years until you were smart enough to switch to Gmail in college or post-college. So, yeah, that's what happened to me, but I made mine last year. At Chichi K. Gomez is mine on the Twitter, which was a nickname of mine as a child.
And
that you gave yourself.
And
That I gave
Lily's
myself.
current and
No
Lily's
one called
current
you that.
and Lily's current last
No.
name is Gomez because her husband's last name is Gomez. So it's
not
an
mine, it's
amalgamation.
his. I don't use it, but just for Twitter.
Noah, do you want people to follow you?
You're welcome to. I don't think there's much to follow. I am an Austin SF, but there's not much there these days.
Can you spell that out for me? Because I tried to find you and I couldn't.
Oh, Naustin SF.
Oh,
in San
and
Francisco.
Austin. Okay. Because, I looked for you and found a lot of stuff about Austin O'Brien, which was...
Yeah, there are a few Noah Austins out there.
There's I went down the Austin, rabbit hole and somehow kept circling back to Austin O'Brien.
Star of The Last Action Hero.
Which we looked at
Yes.
last week. So.
But they all envy me because in 1992 or 3, I reserved my domain of noahaustin.com, so I've got that.
There are a
is
lot of
wild.
Noah Austin.
Wow, got under the ground
It's
floor.
a great name. That sounds like a movie star name. Noah Austin. I like that name a lot.
I'll have to think about a career shift then.
There you go.
You might.
And you can follow me at Pancake4Table on Twitter and Instagram. You can follow all of our shenanigans at pancake4table.com or FridayNightMoviePod.com. Please rate and review us. It's really helpful. We've had a really awesome first year. We're looking to grow even more in the next year. And one of the ways we're going to do that is on June 7th through 9th. Eventually, this is going to be closer, but on June 7th through 9th, we will be at the All-Star Comic-Con in Tyson's Corner, Virginia. We have a booth. We're going to podcast there. We're going to do stuff with people who come by. It's going to be a lot of fun. And you can also catch me with my fellow Gold Nerds, as I mentioned before, on the Gold Nerds podcast every week. At least every week there's an episode of the show, and that's with my dear friends and guests of this podcast, Lons and Ash, and then this week Sana, where we go in extraordinary depth this week on the Muttle the Tailor. Me explaining Muttle the Tailor to people who have no idea what I'm talking about. We're starting with the name is not pronounced motel, it's pronounced Muttle.
Again, I cannot believe, when you're, mind blown that not Fiddler on the Roof is not a thing for a lot of people.
At this point, non-Fiddler on the Roof music will kick in when I edit it, and we all dance in our chairs, Noah, and this is how we sign off. There's a little bit of dancing, and you'll hear the music when you hear the final episode. And I wish you all goodbye and say thank you so much for doing this. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Shy has yet to get special effects advanced enough so that we can hear the music while we record. It's
So you
still
just have to hope that
1970.
you've got the rhythm.
Yeah, exactly.
I keep asking him, can't you just play the music? He's like, it's just the effects are too difficult. I can't. It's not possible. We can't divide by 0. Okay.
That's what you learn in visual effects. Nothing is impossible.
See, Shine, nothing's impossible. You just have to throw some ice water at the wall.
What's that?
And then you can
That's exactly right. It's ice water and gelatin. There you go. You can do anything.
with paper towels.